to another episode of the 10% Better podcast. My name is Andrew McGee and I am your host today. And of course, I have a very special guest with me today, Jim Wylie from Churchill Tax Consultants. Jim, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Thanks very much.
Good. Thanks for being on. Jim and I know each other through the Lanarkshire Business Group. Jim, you must have joined about a year ago now, maybe a bit longer.
Just coming up a year.
Yeah. Jim's been through a year, and the good thing is Jim's business is a very interesting business, I think, for many different business owners, and ultimately, hopefully, we'll hear a wee bit more about how his business can help potential business owners and current business owners as well. Jim, do you want to give us a wee bit of background about yourself and your business?
Yeah, I'm Jim Wylie. I'm the corporate business account manager for Churchill Tax Consultants. We are specialists in tax investigations, tax planning, and forensic accounting is our three specialisms. My battery's running low. Hold on. Sorry.
Okay. All of you guys that are looking to HMRC and such.
Technology's great. I forgot to plug the thing in. Yeah. So we do tax investigations, tax planning, complex tax planning, and we do forensic accounting. So these are things that almost any business might need at some point in their life, basically. The investigation side, anybody's basically can be a target for HMRC. Any taxpayer or anyone they think is avoiding tax, they maybe never paid any, but if they think that you're trying to avoid it, then they'll be after you. And then the tax planning, anyone who's looking to mitigate inheritance tax, capital gains tax, any type of UK tax, we can help there. And more recently, we've been doing forensic accounting, and it's where two directors are maybe having a dispute, two businesses having a dispute, and the other one is marital disputes. So if you high net worth individual and his wife thinks he's hiding some money, wants a better payoff, forensic accounting come into it. So that's our three main specialisms. So we don't do accounts as such, so we're more specialists.
So you were, of course, part of the Jeff Bezos marital divorce case for you. If only.
If only.
And how long have you been in that kind of sector for yourself, Jim?
Me, I've only been with Churchill for just about 20 months.
Right.
Before that, my background is more business development and financial services. So it was like mortgage. I worked with mortgage lenders, with the broker market. And then, obviously, after the sky fell in 2008 with the financial crash, I'd done consultancy work at some of the banks, doing mortgage complaints, FC reviews, PPI complaints for a little while as well, package bank account complaints, dealing with the ombudsman and that type of stuff. So it's been quite varied for them. And then I've done some work for a couple of bridging lenders as well for the short-term funding. And then I got one of the guys who works at Churchill phoned me up and asked me if I would come along and have a chat, and took it from there. So thoroughly enjoying it.
And then you would have been part of the banking industry then when it was at its craziest and busiest and most wildest in 2008, when everybody thought that the world was ending. I think
it was. In 2006, I was working with a company called the Mortgage Business, which were at that time part of the old HBOS group.
Right.
And the directors left there and set up a new company called DB Mortgages, which was being financed by Deutsche Bank. And at that time, the market was just going crazy. It was business, didn't really have to go and look hard for it. We were in the buy-to-let, self-cert type of market at that time. And the directors then approached a few of the guys and took, I think, about 10 of the sales team over to DB. and this I went over and I'd done Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we done something like £2 billion of business in 2 years, and then the sky fell in after that. We at the time when the crash, just before the crash, we for some reason, although we were backed by Deutsche Bank, we reported to New York, and a guy came over from New York and said there's going to be some issues with securitization and things like that. The mortgage market's going to slow down, so we're going to withdraw lending for about 3 months, he said, and everything will settle down and it'll be fine. And they came back after 3 months and said, sorry, I have no idea. And we all get made redundant at that point.
So, I mean, one of the great films with that, if you've ever seen, is The Big Short. It's a wonderful film, and it showcases
a great film.
Absolutely everything that was going on in America at the time, and all around the world, to be fair.
It was America and the UK seemed to have been the worst hit with the especially in the property market. Some companies have just closed down almost overnight. People getting thrown out of offices carrying their box of stuff out. They cleared their desk and out that day. We were lucky. They tried to keep us going for a while. We were looking at like repossessions and doing mystery shopper with some of the estate agents to make sure they were marketing their properties. But then they then started outsourcing that. Found it was obviously a bit cheaper to outsource it. But I've done a stint at Northern Rock, or NRAM, Northern Rock Asset Management, which was classed as the bad book of Northern Rock, and I've done mortgage complaints there, and it was very interesting, very interesting.
And obviously with that's then allowed you to kind of transfer your skills of having to deal with high pressure, high stress kind of situations to your current role as well, I would imagine. Who would you say, Jim, are your kind of typical clients? Do you have a typical client, or is it just very varied with
us? There's probably no such thing as a typical client. Everyone's a potential client for us in the markets we're in. We tend to find more recently on the planning side, it's been more of your property developer or portfolio landlord has been more of our kind of planning over the last few months, and the changes that's been done with Section 24, where the mortgage payment, you can't basically write that off now, but before you take in the rental income, so it's now classed as rental income as your profit. So a lot of, especially your portfolio landlords, are now getting hit with big tax bills because they can't write off all the mortgage payment. So we're getting a lot of that where they had the properties in their own name, and now transferring them over into limited companies so that they can then offset everything. So we're getting a lot of that at the moment. They're also a target for HMRC for the investigation side. What a lot of people don't realise is that letting agents must do a return to HMRC of all the properties that they manage. So if they do a return to HMRC and saying Joe Bloggs says we're managing 24 properties for him, but when Joe Bloggs does his tax return, he's claiming he's only got 20 properties. So then HMRC marry that up and say, oh, there's a discrepancy here, and then we'll start looking into it. And the other thing as well is if HMRC do contact you to say, we're having a look at you, we're going to have an investigation on you, unknown to you, they've been looking at you for about a year before they even contact you. So it's not a case that they've just saw something and that's it. They've done a lot of digging, and it's up to you to get out the hole.
Yeah, and I imagine with the kind of current change in the legislation that there's going to be a hell of a lot of landlords that had properties in their own names, setting up those limited companies, and even from a lender standpoint, lenders are now really looking at it and saying, well, if you have previous landlord experience, we're more than likely to lend to you if you're a named director on that business as well. Yeah,
as I've spoken to quite a few lenders, even just using from a past experience of working for lenders, a lot of them, you've got to have experience as a landlord. So again, if you're coming in as a first-time landlord, you can really struggle to get a mortgage on it. So yeah, they're looking for experienced landlords to have a track record. But yeah, there is lenders that will lend for the kind of first-time landlord, but you won't get the nice rates that are out there.
Yeah.
And again, and there's more and more lenders now looking at limited company. So now, if somebody's got a portfolio and they want to transfer it to a limited company, and a lot of the properties are mortgaged, that's then another issue.
Yeah.
Trying to refinance it. Then you start moving it over, then you can get hit with capital gains tax and stuff like that. And so there's lots of different things to consider when you're doing that. So we have our own kind of tax experts who look into that. In some cases, it's worth bringing it into a partnership first before you make it into a limited company, or bring in family members to kind of offset some of the gains. There's lots of different ways that we can look at it. And then obviously got to think about inheritance tax further down the line. Yeah,
there's a million and one taxes that are going to try and get you with it at some point.
That's it. And then obviously what's been happening over the last few months now with COVID, the furlough scheme and the loan scheme, there's going to be, the government's going to have to pull money back in somehow. They've lent, something like, well, must be going on about 50 billion or something now. They reckon that 10% of that is either fraud or claimed in error. I think it's going to be more than that. I think it's...
So your business is going to be very busy over the next
we're hoping.
2 years, you know.
We're hoping. I was talking to head of our tax investigation just earlier on today, and he's ex-HMRC. He's an ex-senior investigator, and he said that they've had in the region about 50,000 complaints on the furlough scheme and the loan scheme about employers where either they've furloughed somebody but they've made them work, or they've not paid them the correct amount, or they've not used a loan for business purposes. And I also spoke to a mortgage lender a couple of weeks ago, and they do a lot on the buy-to-let side. And they said that when we were talking about that, he said that some people were coming on to him to do a buy-to-let, and they would obviously ask them where the deposit money comes from.
Bounce back loan.
And that's what they were saying. They would use the money, but they were turning that business away. But they said that a lot of people have been coming and saying, "Oh, my accountant told me just to use it as a deposit in a buy-to-let."
Jesus Christ!
So it's that's just an example of how things have been going.
Yeah, and in terms of kind of things that you've dealt with over the years, with obviously, whether it be a landlord base or whatever that may be, has there been any kind of really challenging case that you've kind of felt that stood out, that you've thought, something I can't put that over the line, or that kind of basis?
Again, been speaking to the guys about that on the investigation side. We've had some really kind of meaty ones. An example we had, give a couple of examples. One was a woman who's a foreign national, but she was in the UK doing a PhD. She had 2 kids at private school. Her husband was a very, very wealthy international businessman from the Far East. And he was, when he came over here, he would deposit large chunks of money into a bank account for her to live. Obviously, the banks report a lot to HMRC. And so HMRC hit her with a bill for like £850,000. And she'd been to a couple of accountants and was getting nowhere. And then somebody suggested she talk to Churchill, and she came to us, and we took on the case. It took a bit of it was time consuming, but it took a lot of work. But we also had to wait for her husband to be in the UK, and we had to get copies of his passport, all his stamps in it. We had to get bank statements and witness statements and stuff. But the result we got was that she wasn't due any tax at all, and so we didn't have to go to tribunal. We managed to settle at what they call ADR stage, which is alternative dispute resolution. We sit across a desk from somebody at HMRC. There's generally 2 or 3 of them. They never come alone. And we settled that. And another one we had that was a property developer up in the east coast of Scotland. Was getting hit for a tax bill of £375,000, and we negotiated it down to 30,000.
Bloody hell.
So they do a lot. So we had to go back quite a few years on his accounts and try and show a couple of losses and stuff that he could offset. But we got it down to 30,000. Guy was over the moon. He's got a big portfolio of properties, so we got his tax planning as well, which is a nice case to get. But yes, stuff yours.
Jesus, those are too big. I mean, when you think of being hit with an £850,000 tax bill, that's unreal. You know, obviously there is levels to the finances that some people may have, and this international businessman, 850k may have been a drop in the ocean, but it's still a huge amount of cash. You know.
Yeah.
And then that's sorry, on you go.
Another thing, when HMRC are involved, obviously the stress levels, we try and get through to, we deal with accountants as well who don't have the expertise, and we try always tell the client not to talk to HMRC, come to us and we'll do all the talking. It's like you see a police interview on TV and it's the solicitor tells them no comment. That's what we try and tell them, just keep quiet, we'll do all the talking. And I remember speaking to an accountant down in Newcastle one time, and she took on an investigation herself, thought, I can barely deal with that. And she went to HMRC's office in Newcastle, and she's felt she's never been so intimidated in her life. There's been there and three of them sitting grilling her. And she said, so from now on, she passes any stuff to us now.
100%. Because
we're used to it now.
Oh yeah, and when you think about even the base of business owners, say a woman that's got a wee flower shop, she gets a bill in from HMRC that's £12,000, and she thinks she only owes 3, and they say, oh well, you owe 12. She gets worried and just pays it, and then it's up to her to try and get it back somehow. You know, that's
exactly that's the way HMRC works.
Yeah, they get that brown letter, and people just panic and go, oh no, I better pay that, or I'll end up in jail. Whereas 9 times out of 10. A lot of the times they don't owe that at all.
Exactly. I'll give you a good example. We as a thing called the Gazette, in Scotland we call it the Edinburgh Gazette, where they show all the insolvencies and stuff like that, and it gives you all the ones that HMRC are trying to make insolvent. And we sometimes get through that. We'll send letters out. And we had one guy came to us and he said, look, you know, HMRC, they're looking for, I think it was £34,000 they were looking for him. They said they're shutting me down in the next couple of weeks if I don't do anything. So we get involved in the case. He hadn't done his VAT return, and hadn't done a tax return in the last year. So we done it all. It turned out the HMRC owed him money, but yet they were trying to close him down. So again, that guy could have just put his head in the sand and he would have been bust. So definitely times you've got to get expert advice.
And that's why it does make a huge amount of sense to reach out to a business like yourself, somebody like you, because I guarantee you, see, if you were to look at the amount of numbers of people that have either paid incorrectly of what they don't really owe, or have essentially shut their businesses down in fear of owing too much, the numbers would be unbelievable, you know. It's just that brown letter that people, I've had them over the years where I look at it, I get it through and I go, there's no way in hell that I owe that. But I've had the experience of seeing that, sent it to my accountant and saying, what's the script here? And it's 25% of what the actual letter is, you know. But a lot of people are just very kind of quick fire and shoot from the hip and, I better transfer that through, you know.
The other thing as well, some accountants, they think, you know, like an example, like somebody getting a brown letter in and saying, going to their accountant and saying, look, tell me I owe £50,000, and the accountant says, I'll sort it, don't worry. He comes back and says, it's okay, we've got it reduced to 40. And the accountant thinks he's done a great job. In a case like that, we'd be looking to get it reduced to about 4 rather than 40. So again, he thinks he's done a good job making a phone call, a couple of phone calls, a couple of emails to HMRC, and they've said, oh, yeah, we'll knock 10 grand off it. Whereas we'd be looking to get it drastically reduced. And it's just the difference. So
And do you think where we are kind of now in 2020, obviously with all the borrowing and the loans and the furlough and everything, do you think that there will be what do you kind of forecast for the change for corporate tax for the next kind of 5 years? Do you think it will be an increase in corporation tax or VAT or both?
I think just now that they'll sit tight and leave things as they are at the moment, because obviously they're having to lend so much money.
Yeah.
But yeah, personally, I think there's going to have to be an increase. They're going to have to pull this money in somehow, either increasing VAT or corporation tax, or come up with some other tax, or they're really going to have to step up the investigation side big time to get better results and pull money in. But I think they'll be a lot more aggressive over the next few years. I think so. When someone gets the brown envelope, they'll need to move a lot quicker. I think they're going to get a lot more aggressive.
It's the volume as well of staff and resources that HMRC have. You know, I mean, I was speaking to someone the other day and I said it's like the best business in the world because everyone is your client multiple times over. You don't have to go looking for work. You constantly get people coming to you with work, and because of that, the amount of staff that they have, the amount of resources that they have are just endless, you know. And like you say, if they are in the position where they're introducing a new tax or whatever it may be, that's a whole other minefield as well. I know they spoke about the internet tax maybe coming in, the internet sales tax, and again, but for you guys as well, though, that's something that's just a whole other aspect of the business.
Oh, that's it. You know, every time they do something, you know, you look back, even the likes of the thing with Rangers with EBT, that went on and on and on and on. There's another thing out is the film partnership stuff. It was, I think Tony Blair brought that in about 2002-03, and then HMRC changed the rules about 2016, and now people are getting hit with big tax bills for investing in these schemes. And we're seeing a couple of cases through that. We've got a good contact for dealing with that. We've actually got a guy who actually ran the film partnership scheme for HMRC, who's now on this side of the fence. So he understands it totally. So we're building up a case with that way. So there's lots of different things that HMRC can do. But when the lockdown started, HMRC moved a lot of staff away from the investigation side. They're still doing the big high-profile stuff, but you know, a lot of the run-of-the-mill stuff, they moved staff away to cope with the deferring VAT payments and deferring other types of tax and the furlough scheme and the bounce back stuff. So they moved that. So they're all now back into their original jobs. So the investigation side is going to step up a gear now, and so you might hear of people getting a knock on the door. A brown letter saying, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. The other thing as well, obviously, you know, if I've had them myself, emails tell me, you know, HMRC are investigating me. It's a lot of rubbish. It's a scam. So never answer them, never do anything, just delete it. That type of thing. The other thing to avoid potential fraud in the future is that if you're any documentation you're signing or checks or anything over the next, well, especially this year, never just put 20. You know, don't put the 1st of October 20. Always make it 2020. Because you can change it to 2021, 2022, 2023, whatever. So you could leave yourself wide open to a fraud further down the line. So that's just when we daft thing like that can save you a bit of hassle.
And that's the other thing as well with the amount of potential HMRC scams just now that they have increased daily. I mean, I got a phone call. It was maybe, I think this was just before the lockdown, and it was my mother had says to me, oh, there's a voicemail from HMRC and they said they're doing an investigation for you because you owe X amount of cash. And I says, listen, I says, a couple of things. I says, number one, they wouldn't phone to tell me this. No. Number two, I says, they wouldn't leave a voicemail saying there's an exact sum. I says, do you know what to do? delete the voicemail and everything will be fine, you know. But there is all of these people from whatever country that are trying to just obviously capitalise on this kind of uncertain time, you know.
And with the furlough scheme and the bounce back loan scheme, there's going to be, especially the loan scheme, there's a lot of people going to get something in next year to say you can now start paying your loan, and they won't know a thing about it.
Of course.
And I don't know if you heard about the fraud with the car dealer.
Seen the video.
Yeah. So again, there's just been so much going on. There's so much information out there in the public domain, and that's why people are going to be. I think it's going to be a lot more than 10%. It's going to be fraud. There was one recently, a guy down in the Midlands got arrested for a £495,000 loan scheme fraud. I think he was getting looked at for something else, and that just came up at the same time, because he borrowed 495,000, and that meant it was being underwritten by the government. If he'd borrowed £500,000, he'd have been responsible for it for non-payment.
Jesus.
So he'd obviously but I think he was being investigated by the police for something else, and they've obviously found that as well. He did get arrested for that and done for fraud. And then more recently, there was a guy up north, a fisherman, failed to do any accounts for 5 years, and he got hit with a £100,000 bill, and he ended up getting jailed for 15 months for that. And I don't know whether, just after that, I got a call from a guy out the blue, and it's what they call Code of Practice 9, which is serious fraud, which means they can take you to court and you can go to jail. And this guy contacted me. I don't know if it was because he saw that thing, and he contacted me and said, can we have a chat? Yeah, sure. So I phoned me up and said, I've not done any accounts for a couple of years. I think I might be in trouble. So I put him in touch with Dave Jennings, who's our head of investigation. And Dave phoned me back about 2 hours later, and said that the guy's in serious trouble. He says he's not done any accounts for about 6 years. He said he's in serious trouble. He says, so the name of the game for us is to approach HMRC and then tell them that we'll do a full disclosure. They'll get paid as long as they don't take him to court. And they thought, well, we'll get our money then. So they've agreed not to go to court. So we'll do a full disclosure. So we'll go through his accounts for the last number of years, and then do a full disclosure to HMRC. The bill might be 700 grand or something like that. But
saved that guy going to jail.
Saved him going to jail, and I think he'd have went to jail for a few years for that one. So that's the type of stuff as well that people can get involved in. And there's a lot of serious stuff, and then also the proceeds of crime stuff. We can get involved in that, where if somebody's been pursued for proceeds of crime for whatever, it's up to him to prove the funds are legit or not legit. Well, that's where we can use the forensic accounting for that side as well, to prove or disprove the money's his. So again, if the government are looking for £400,000, we might be able to prove it only 100 grand is illegal, and he can keep the rest. So that type of thing. So yeah.
And with all these kind of the correspondences and stuff that you've had to do through this lockdown, have you had any kind of changes in the way you're operating? Has it had to be through Zoom, or has it had to be? Are you still able to do meetings just now, or?
It's near enough all Zoom or Teams.
Right.
Or I use WhatsApp for Emirates abroad. We've been doing some business with a couple of guys in Ireland and a couple of guys in Singapore. So I've been doing that. But no, it's mostly Zoom. I think since lockdown, I think I've had about 3 face-to-face meetings in that time. It's all Zoom. And the one thing I do like about Zoom and Teams is I find everybody's more punctual. If somebody sends you an invite for 10 o'clock in the morning, you generally find they're there at 10 o'clock. Whereas if you go to their office, there's a good chance you're left sitting about for 10, 15, 20 minutes. So I find it's good that way. And you're not wasting a lot of time travelling between appointments as well. So you can have a 10, 11, a 12 appointment. Whereas if you're out on the road, you would maybe only have a 10 and a 12. Yeah, it's good that way. As long as the connection's good. And
I think also though, I think people can be more focused on Zoom meetings, i.e. if there's stuff, or if you're using Microsoft Teams, if there's stuff that's to be done on the agenda, there's a lot less initial chat, there's a lot more kind of laser focus on what the subjects are. I would say for me, and the experience I've had is there's been more action points being able to be taken. And also, like you say, even from a productivity standpoint, instead of having a meeting in Aberdeen and a meeting in Kilsyth and a meeting in whatever, where you'd maybe only get 2 done over the course of the day, you could have them every single hour and get through a lot more clients and be able to then offshoot things that have to be done and communicate that a wee bit better. Obviously, there's the face-to-face thing as a way for the time being anyway, which is a big part of building relationships, and especially in business. But I do think, like you say, that there is some benefits to this whole Zoom thing as well, you know.
Oh, definitely. I've seen more inside more conservatories in the last 6 months than I've seen that ever seen. Because that seems to be, you know, anybody's got a conservatory, that's now their office.
Yeah.
But yeah, I must admit, I'm enjoying it. Not getting stuck in traffic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I still miss the face to face. Still miss that interaction that, you know, or even having like a meeting over lunch and stuff like that, which you can't do. But yeah, no, I'm getting used to it. I think I know, speaking to some of the people in the bigger companies, a lot of them are not expecting to be back in the office before Easter. It's getting that bad.
Yeah.
You know, my daughter works for a big company in Edinburgh, and they've been told, don't even think about being in the office this year.
Yeah. And with you kind of working from home now, then, is there anything, do you have any wee kind of quirks that you do day to day, or anything that's in your routine just to help you kind of stay focused? And for instance, I do things like I'll go a run at a certain point, or I'll go and exercise at a certain point, and then I'll play guitar for half an hour just to take my mind off it, you know, just so I can stay productive.
I do go for a walk. My wife and I will go for a walk. We're fairly rural, so we could go for a walk and never meet anyone anyhow, so it's quite good that way. But yeah, we'll go for a walk. I will walk away from the laptop, you know, for a wee while, even just to sit down and have a cup of tea and watch the news or something like that. Yeah, just to, again, plus also, I know a lot of people will sit and lounge about in maybe their pyjamas or whatever. I still get up and I shave and I shower and everything as if I'm, you know, a normal working day. But I think I tend to work maybe a wee bit later as well. If I feel I'm having a sky for half an hour in the afternoon, I'll tend to work a bit longer at night. I think I'll do, you know, I've been getting a lot of stuff through LinkedIn. I hadn't used LinkedIn a lot. Been on LinkedIn for years, but never done much with it. By the time of the lockdown, I thought, well, maybe there's something to be done here. And I must admit, I've picked up some good business from across the UK, and obviously they've got a couple of cases now in Singapore.
Was that through LinkedIn, the Singapore cases?
LinkedIn, yeah. I've had Zoom meetings with people in India and Dubai and stuff like that. It's and on the investigation side and the planning side, some of the things can take months to actually sort out. But the investigation, it just depends how quick HMRC want to work. And they don't do nothing quick. On the planning side, it can take a few months depending on the size of the assets and the portfolio and stuff like that. It can take a few months to actually get across the line to get everything signed and sealed. But yeah, so it's good.
And I think also it is one of those ones where sometimes you do see yourself working a wee bit more in the house than you necessarily would if you were in the office. As an example, last night I was doing calls until 9 o'clock last night. I was then planning out other stuff until 10, and I'm in the office just now, and I thought to myself, I've actually put in more hours than I would if I was doing a normal, regular kind of shift, you know. But it doesn't really seem like, it's still work, of course, but it just seems to be a bit, that flexibility maybe makes it less so feeling like that, you know, which is good. I think you're more relaxed as well when you're at home. And I know I've heard reports of some people saying they're stressed working from home, but personally, I'm
less stressed when I'm working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And same with Lisa in the evening, as you were saying there, my wife's into soaps, you know, it's Coronation Street and EastEnders. So when that comes on, I'll go through another room and do some work rather than sit and watch soap. So yeah, so it has its advantages that way, I suppose.
Yeah. And let's say, as an example, when anytime I'm speaking to anybody in business, I always kind of approach this conversation as, let's say if you were advising someone that was maybe either starting a business tomorrow, or if you were starting a business tomorrow, is there anything that you would do now that you've been about the industry for such a long time? Is there anything specific that you would maybe do that generally people wouldn't think about when they're starting a business, maybe in regards to tax planning?
Is get good tax advice for setting up. Find out if there's any grants available as well. A lot of people don't think, they just think there's no grants, but some businesses there is grants. Look into again, if you take good tax planning advice, even when you're setting up the business, some industries might have a concession on either VAT or corporation tax, depending on whether it's financial services or whatever. So yeah, look into that type of stuff. That you might only be a couple of %, but it can be, you know, at the end, if you have a really good year, it could be a good saving. So yeah, definitely take expert tax planning advice.
And do you guys advise for instance, let's say if you were kitting out a building with certain materials and such, there is some tax advantages to some materials over others in terms of purchases, isn't there?
Yeah, there's capital allowances you can claim. Again, depending what type of business you're doing, there might be research and development tax claims, which can be fairly chunky. And a lot of people think it's guys in a white coat in a lab that get R&D. It's not always that. It's not always the case. It can be any type of business. If you can make changes to the way you work or how to better your competition, could be something silly. We don't do the R&D claims, but we know we've got contacts who do, and I've heard of some nice, getting checks for 30, 40, 100 grand back. I remember when somebody told me it was a company that supplied like pet supplies and garden supplies. They come up with some online system that actually compared their price against all their competitors, and whenever the competitors changed their price, theirs changed by 1 penny less. And when they done an R&D claim, and they got £100,000 back, because in R&D you can claim staff salaries, you can claim pension funds, you can claim travelling costs if somebody's maybe had to travel for, maybe go across to the Far East for retooling, something like that. So there's lots of stuff you can claim, but a lot of people, a lot of companies will get a regular £20,000–30,000 in an R&D claim, especially with software stuff. A lot of it can be claimed there. There was one, I remember the guy telling us it was a dental lab. They'd come up with some couple of new materials that they used, and the research and development doesn't have to be successful. It can fail, but you can still claim. So some companies do actually might pay a couple of full-time employees just to keep doing research development, and they just keep claiming that so they can cover their salary.
And I think that's something that when young people or anybody going into business thinks about tax or thinks about HMRC or VAT or whatever it may be, it's always an afterthought. It's always, I'll deal with that when I get the letter through, or when I get the figures through. I'll deal with that when I have to pay it. Whereas, like you say, if you're planning prior to the actual fact happening, you can then say, okay, well, here's how I can make the smartest decisions now that will be far more of a financial benefit to me come year end, you know?
Yeah, that's it. You know, even just think about your business and what you're going to be doing, what your expenses are going to be. So again, you know, you're going to be running a car, a van, or whatever. What way can you you offset that in your business. There's lots of different things to think about. You know, a lot of people think, oh, especially over the last few years where the self-employment has went through the roof, you know, because so many people have been made redundant or whatever between the financial crash and now this. So self-employment's went through the roof. And so, but a lot of people have just jumped into it and not thinking, and then all of a sudden they go to the accountant, and the accountant says, well, according to your account, you'll need to pay X amount. But there's a lot of accountants don't actually give any tax advice. They'll just do your accounts, give them all the receipts and the figures, and they'll do that, and they'll come up with a figure, but they're not actually giving any tax advice as such. And so we contact a lot of accountants, and we try and get through to them by saying, you know, we're specialists. You know, it's like going to your doctor with a heart problem. The doctor's going to send you to a specialist. We try and get that across the accountants. The client's always theirs. We're never going to steal the client, but we will help the accountant with the specialist knowledge on the planning or an investigation.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the keys, is to get on top of it beforehand rather than let it get on top of you, you know.
That's it.
Just as a wee last quick one for my own personal questioning, there's a book called Profit First. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Howitz, and he's very much so exactly what you're saying. He's talking about being more proactive towards tax planning than reactive. And I read that probably about 3 years ago, and started implementing things that made a massive difference, as opposed to dealing with them when they're on my desk. I can now future plan for them and implement things now to obviously have a benefit years down the line, you know.
That's it.
I would definitely say for anybody watching this as well, if you are starting out in business, it is something that you need to do. It's something you're going to have to cover at some point, so you might as well put in the best practices and systems just now. For tax planning and doing the most efficient way that you possibly can to operate your own business personally, you know.
That's it.
Jim, is there anywhere where people can find you if they're looking to get in touch with you? I heard you say you were on LinkedIn a bit more now.
I'm on LinkedIn, just Jim Wylie, on LinkedIn. You can get me on email at just jim@churchilltaxconsultants.com, or again, my phone number. Phone number's 07908 730 655. So you can contact me any of those three ways. Delighted to have a chat with anybody, even if they just want to ask what they might think is a daft question, but there's no such thing as a daft question when it comes to tax.
Exactly. And what I'll do as well, I'll link Jim's details in the show notes as well. So I'll put his LinkedIn in there, his phone number in there, and his email. And as I say, guys, if anybody wants to get in contact with them, you've heard just a snippet of some of the stories, the numbers such as 350,000 getting taken down to 30, but also just for full tax planning purposes, it will make a big difference as well.
Yeah.
Jim,
especially in the tax planning side, when between inheritance tax and capital gains tax, you could potentially leave your family with a 68% tax bill. Between inheritance tax and capital gains tax, which can be easily mitigated with good tax planning.
Yeah.
So
you'd much rather do it that way than give it to the government for that, you know.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, you know. But no,
I'm sure a lot of people would do. No problem, Andrew.
I appreciate you coming on, and as I say, Jim, it gives people a great insight into how tax planning can help, how it can help their business, and ultimately, as I say, it will be of benefit to a lot of different people as well. Guys, for anybody that did find any of the podcasts interesting, as always, like I say, please do subscribe, please do share the podcast through Spotify and iTunes. And as always, the whole goal is to make you guys become 10% better, go out there, take action, and live a better life overall. Jim, thank you very much again for coming on, buddy.
No bother. Thanks, Andrew.
Cheers.
Right. Cheers.